We're going to continue on with factoring today, and just like yesterday when we looked at the distributive property backwards in order to factor a greatest common factor, we're going to use an example of multiplying two binomials together to make a trinomial to talk about factoring trinomials. So if you look at our first example here, x plus 2 times x plus 4, when you multiply that out, you get x times x is x squared, x times 4 is 4x. Then you get the 2 times x is 2x, the 2 times 4 is 8, which simplifies to x squared plus 6x plus 8. And went ahead and did the exact same thing for a second example. X minus 5 times x plus 3 will simplify to x squared minus 2x minus 15. What I would like you to look at for a second is the 2 and the 4 in our first example, and the solution we get, x squared plus 6x plus 8. And when you look at the negative 5 and 3, the solution is x squared minus 2x minus 15. You might recognize a pattern with those numbers. The 2 and the 4 add to 6 and multiply to 8. Negative 5 and 3 add to negative 2 and multiply to negative 15. This is going to be the shortcut we're going to use to factor trinomials. The two numbers that you are given add to the middle term and multiply to the last term. Notice this pattern, this shortcut will only work when you have just x squared. It does not apply when you have a number in front. So therefore we are going to go from x squared plus 6x plus 8 and write it as x plus 2 times x plus 4. The same thing we did yesterday, but instead of getting a monomial times a binomial, you're now going to get a binomial times a binomial. So we're going to look at two different examples for factoring. The first one is going to be one where the constant term is positive. What I mean by that, constant meaning the number, the term with no x. The 27 on the end here is positive. We're going to factor x squared minus 12x plus 27. Because the x squared does not have a coefficient in front of it, it's just a 1, we can use the shortcut. In order to factor this trinomial, we need to come up with two numbers that add to negative 12 and multiply to 27. So that's basically the question we're being asked. What two numbers multiply to 27 and add to negative 12? Those two numbers are negative 9 and negative 3, which means the factored form of x squared minus 12x plus 27 is x minus 9 times x minus 3. Just like we did yesterday, you could always check your solution by multiplying this out. X times x is x squared, negative 3x, and negative 9x is negative 12x. Negative 9 times negative 3 is positive 27. So if this term is positive, you simply look for numbers that add to negative 12 and multiply to 27. And we can even think of the 12 as a positive if it helps you come up with those numbers. We're looking for 9 and 3. But then we can recognize that in order to make a positive when you multiply and negative when you add, both values must have been negatives. Our final example is going to be when we have a negative in our constant term. We have a negative 35 at the end. That means we've now changed the problem a bit. We're looking for numbers that multiply to negative 35 and add to negative 2. Some of us have issues with our negative numbers, so it might be easier to think of it in another way. When you multiply to get a negative value, one of your answers must be negative, one of them must be positive. That's the only way you can multiply to get a negative. That means when you add those values together, you're actually going to subtract the negative from the positive to get 2. So that means we're looking for two numbers that are 2 apart from each other that multiply to get 35. Those two numbers would be 7 and 5. Now we need to come up with which one of those must be negative to get them to add to a negative 2. Well, negative 7 plus 5 would be negative 2. So therefore, in our factored form, our 7 must be negative and our 5 must be positive. When we are factoring, all we're looking to do is come up with two numbers that add to the middle and multiply to the last. If you are good with your negatives, this will be something you can come up with fairly quickly. Those of you that struggle with negatives, we may have to work on some shortcuts for you that may help you out. All right, good luck. If you have questions, make sure you ask.